Good morning, and again good afternoon or good evening if you're watching this at a different time of day. So firstly, what I want you to do is I just want to invite you to sort of assess where you feel you are right now. How can you be as prepared as you can in order to focus on the video and the information that's coming into you? Are there any distractions around? Do you need to change your body posture? Do you need to sit upright, be a bit more alert so that you can move yourself into a mindset that feels that you're paying more attention, that you're focusing in on what you need to learn? And throughout this video, how can you bring yourself back to the information that you want to take in? What can you focus on? So this is entirely up to you, obviously, but maybe you want to focus on some of the lettering on some of the slides. Maybe you want to bring your attention back by looking at a picture on the slide. Now I'm very aware that I have no scarf this morning, I know, who'd have thought, but I do have some earrings, so you could focus in on an earring, but whatever it is, just sort of take a pause right now to think about how do I best position myself to pay the most attention I can and get the most out of this video. And the format is the same. So we are going to do a mindfulness exercise. We're going to have a teeny tiny recap on homework and what we did last week, and then we're going to go into the delivering the skills part of emotion regulation 3. You will need handouts 7 to 13 to hand, and you'll also need to refer back to handout 6, which has 10 components to it. It looks through at all the different emotions. And for the first exercise that we do with the skills delivery, you'll need worksheet 1. Okay, so we're going to do a mindfulness exercise, and again we're just going to look at how do we bring our mind back when our mind goes off wandering. How do we focus on the task that we are wanting to focus on rather than let our brain hijack us to go off somewhere else? And so we're going to be aware of uninvited thoughts that pop in when they have no permission to, sensations that we might be generating, and that sort of goes with those urges to act. Any associations we have when we're doing the exercise, judgments, any rules we make up, any attachments we get to a particular part of the exercise of what we're doing. And then what we're going to look at is so how did you bring your attention back, and when did you notice that thought? Did that affect how easy it was to engage in the task? Did it make it harder? And is this a pattern in your everyday life? So we're going to do a participation mindfulness exercise, and I am going to make a series of claps and sounds, actions, and your job is to copy them. So you're copying the rhythm and the action. So for instance, I went, that's what you would copy. Okay. So we're going to do this for 2 minutes. If your mind goes off wandering somewhere, or you lose count or lose track, which we all do, you bring your mind back by focusing on the most recent rhythm, and that's how you get back into it. Okay, so if you've got a hard surface to tap on, that's great. If not, use your thighs. However, do not tap too hard, otherwise you're going to have some very sore thighs by the end of this. Okay, So we're going to do this for 2 minutes. Okay. Okay. How did you do? What happened if you found it difficult to follow? What happened if I moved on to the next one before you'd even finished? Because, you know, I can't see you doing this. It's entirely possible my timers were completely out. What did you notice if that did happen? I know for me, when I'm doing something like this, that as soon as I start feeling that I'm not quite catching up or I'm not being able to do the exercises possibly, I have an urge, very strong urge to give up, to not participate, and I have to work quite hard to use opposite action to just keep ploughing through it so that I can get back in the zone again. So I don't know how you did. So this is the teeny tiny Vita cap. Okay, so I would invite you to get Handout 6 out and just have a quick pause and review of the emotions that we were looking at last week, because you're going to need to refer back to them in this session. And how did you get on with your homework? What did you learn? Just take a pause for a moment to jot down on a piece of paper or pen, you know, what got in the way? Did you do deliberate practice? Did you put it off and think, I'll do that tomorrow? How did you manage to do your homework? What helped you? What got you through? What got in the way? And linking that to this exercise, I really want to look here at the pros and cons of regulating emotion. We've had 2 sessions of emotion regulation, and so you've got a pretty good idea now about what emotions do for us and the function and the urges that are associated with emotions. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to pause the video to get your worksheet number 1, and we're going to have a bit of an experiment doing pros and cons with an emotion that you felt over the last week. So once you have that in front of you, what I want you to do is I want you to cast your mind back over the last week to a time when you know that you were in emotion mind. But I want to put caution here, not excessively so. So please don't choose the hardest part of last week. If it's easier, sometimes getting a distance can be really useful. So you might want to just cast your mind back to last week and whilst imagining that you're watching yourself on a cinema screen and watching that scene play out. Or you might want to think of it as sitting on a bus or a train, just watching scenery passing by as if that's the memory going past. Sometimes getting a distance from things helps us see things a bit more clearly, or helps us to see things that we might not have seen at the time. So when you have an emotion that you can identify from last week, then what I want you to do is I want you to make a list of the pros and cons of changing that emotion that you were having difficulty with. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go on to make another list of the pros and cons of not changing that emotion. And in order to help you, you will notice that there's some questions on worksheet 1 that you can ask yourself. So a really good one was living in emotion mind in your best interest? I.e., was it effective? Or was it not in your best interest? That means you know it probably wasn't effective for you. Did you refuse to regulate your own emotions? So did you have a wee bit of willfulness? And did that then create a new problem for you? Because we're really good at that, aren't we? Digging our heels in, and before you know it, we've got 3 problems to deal with instead of the original. Was reducing that high emotion at that time likely to increase or decrease your freedom? Was being attached to that emotion in that situation useful or not? And did you have a thought that actually reducing my emotion, regulating my emotion is like literally too much like hard work? And if you did have that thought, is that true? So just pause the video, allow yourself to complete the pros and cons. And when you've completed it, what did you notice? Just jot down right now what it is you notice when you look at the list that you've compiled. Would you be prepared to use pros and cons more often when it comes to the pros and cons of regulating emotion? Okay, so you'll notice on this side it says introducing this week's and next week's emotional regulation skills. And that's because this is quite a big area to check the facts, do opposite action and problem solving all in one go. And also I think that it's quite useful to try and get your head around the first part of how do I check the facts, and start to sort of move towards therefore what can I do with it in the first session. And then in the second session what we're going to do, so next week, going to really fine-tune opposite action and problem solving. But actually you're already familiar a bit with opposite action because we did that in distress tolerance. So that doesn't mean to say you can't do opposite action and problem solving during the week. It's just that we will focus more on how you check the facts in this particular session. So why check the facts? Why is it a good idea to do this? Well, in the next slide I'm going to run through some examples of when we really do need to have a look at our emotions and whether the facts and interpretations and assumptions we're attaching to them are actually in our best interest. But basically we're wanting to check out the facts because we need to have a look at whether the reactions that we're having emotionally actually do fit the facts of the situation. And that allows us to change our beliefs and assumptions, and so that they fit the facts more accurately, and they help us to change our emotional reactions to situations, which ultimately allows us to feel in control. We have more options. We are allowing ourselves to access wise mind. And as we know, being able to access wise mind allows us to pull together both emotional mind and rational mind. So why check the facts? Okay. Well, thoughts and interpretations about events and situations can set off powerful emotions. And they set off powerful emotions because we believe those instead of the facts. So again, I'm going to read Marsha Linehan's examples because, well, I don't like inventing the wheel, and also her examples are really very good. So she looks at how beliefs about reality can cause powerful emotions. So she gives an example of a person who believes that a loved one has died in a car accident will feel deep sadness and grief, even if that information the person was given was inaccurate and the loved one did not in fact die. So the information that we're given about something we interpret as true without checking it out first, don't we? A person who believes that someone's trying to hurt him or her may feel very afraid, even if the facts are completely different and the other person is trying to help and not hurt them. So sometimes when we're in a high state of arousal and somebody approaches us, we're going to see them as a threat, even if they're actually approaching us to give us some help. Faulty beliefs about what we think we need can lead to emotional misery, and that relates to when we are in high states of arousal and where our brain wants to automatically go to the solution that it's gone to many times at all, that actually could help us in the short term but doesn't help us a lot in the long term. So for instance, I need illicit drugs to control my pain, instead of I need to find an effective, non-destructive way to deal with my pain. Another example, I must be in control, instead of I like being in control better than I like being out of control. Another good example is you should be. So you should be different, you should be nicer, on time, more understanding, you should be willing to give me more pay. Quite like that one. Instead of you are who you are. Something caused you to be this way and I like you to be different. It has a completely different feel to it, doesn't it? The second part of the statement. Try experimenting with that and just see how that affects how you feel inside when you say it in a different way. So faulty beliefs about events can cause new problems. I can pass a test without studying it beforehand. That's what I call the it'll be fine solution. I don't know about you, but I haven't got a hope of passing the test if I don't study it beforehand. I have enough petrol in the car to get where I'm going when the fuel gauge is most definitely on empty. I'm certainly guilty of that. I am used to driving along with that little red light just bleeping away at me going, fill me up now, fill me up now. And I am convinced that it'll be fine. I will get to my destination without needing to fill my car up, because for some reason I do not like going into a garage and filling my car up, because it's like time, isn't it? Spending time with your friends means that you do not love me and I should move out the house. So what we're doing there is we're commenting on a behaviour that somebody is spending time with their friends. We're making an interpretation, that means you don't love me. And then we are also bringing up and catastrophising with a conclusion, I must move out of the house. Actually, the only thing that's factual in that is that somebody is spending time with their friends. And we need to quantify that. How much time? How often? You're not inviting me to the party means you don't like me. again, it's a similar thing, isn't it? So you haven't been invited to the party, and what you're doing is drawing your own conclusions about whether somebody likes you or not. Thinking in absolutes can set off extreme emotions. So we tend to go to an extreme, don't we, when we're thinking. So instead of he's pretty annoyed with me, we go with he hates me. Instead of we might go, this job's terrible, I can't stand it, because in that moment that's how it feels. But actually what we might say is some parts of this job are difficult, other parts are not so bad, I can tolerate this, I can cope with it. If I don't make straight A's in this course, I am a complete failure. Well, that's not entirely true, is it? So it might be, I may want an A, but less than an A is not a failure. Then you have absolutes about how people see themselves and others. So it might be you're either strong or weak. So you're either vulnerable or not. Instead of, a person can be tough at times and vulnerable at other times. So our emotions can also affect how we think about events and how we react to thoughts as well. So for instance, when we're feeling annoyed or angry, we've not had a really good day, that really cheery friend who contacts us can sometimes seem really annoying, whereas at other times we would have welcomed that contact from them. I don't know if you've had the experience of when you feel anxious or afraid, and it's like the classic watching a horror movie before you go to bed. Then suddenly the sound of the wind rattling, a window feels like somebody's breaking in, doesn't it? So our mind goes into overdrive because what's happening is our fear system has been activated, and so our brain is automatically scanning for threat. And sometimes when we're in a really happy mood, that a person who we previously found really annoying is somebody we want to be with. If we're feeling a level of shame about something and we turn a corner and two people are talking, we might automatically assume that they're talking about us. It's that thing about wanting to hide away, feeling exposed, isn't it? And we're very good at catastrophizing, aren't we? So if we receive a bad grade when we're studying and we're feeling sad at the same time, we're likely to interpret that as, that is it, I will never graduate, I will never complete this course. So we're not going with the facts of the situation, what we're going with is our interpretation and our assumptions of the situation. So I just want you to get a piece of paper and pencil. And I'm just going to run through a scenario, and what I want you to do is I want you to just pause at times just to jot down what your assumptions are, what feelings come up for you while I'm reading this out. Okay. So I want you to imagine the scene. So you're either driving yourself or with somebody else who's driving you, and you get a flat tire, and you'll get a flat tire. You've had to pull over. Let's say you're on the motorway. You had to pull over onto the motorway, and you find that there's like a little lay-by that you can go into. So you are parked up there, probably out of your car actually, because you're supposed to go out of your car, aren't you? And you notice a car coming towards you, which has a very close friend in it. So you are waving to your friend to let them know that you have broken down, and they whiz straight past you. How do you feel? Feel angry? Feel hurt? Disappointed? You have to wait for a long time for the rescue people to come and fix the tyre. You're delayed. to wherever you're going to. You eventually get home. How are you feeling about your friend? Then you discover later on that actually the reason that your friend didn't see you and was rushing past you in their car was because they were trying to get their young child, who was in the back of the car, to hospital because they were seriously ill. How do you feel then? Does that change how you feel? Does it also change your memory of the event? Are you seeing it in a different light now? So sometimes when we don't have all the information we need about an event, what we do is we conjure up, we fix in the missing bits, we make up things that sort of fit. But that doesn't mean to say that that's accurate. So I just want to go back to beliefs about reality can cause powerful emotions. I want you to get a piece of paper and a pencil, and I want you to jot down your reaction to this picture when you see it. So you just spend a few minutes just looking at it and just noticing what you're feeling, what your thoughts are, and what assumptions you're making. Do you find yourself wanting to move away from the picture? Not wanting to look at it? Or do you find yourself wanting to rescue the dog? Do you see the dog as sort of quirky? Or cute? Or weird? Jot down the words or phrases that come to mind. What are the thoughts that are going through your head? And then what I want you to do is think about, what is my reaction based on? Because our reactions are shaped by our own experience, by our personalities, our beliefs, and our assumptions about the world, ourselves, other people. So what is your reaction here based on? Did you have good or bad experiences with dogs in the past? Did you grow up with animals? If you did grow up with animals, were you a doggy family or a catty family? Or did you have both? What have you heard other people say about dogs? How's that influencing you? And what have you heard people say about this particular type of dog? How does that influence you? This is hugely important, because the more we can be aware of what influences us, the more control we have about our emotional reactions to things, and the more skilled we can be about how we fit the facts to something. So, for instance, just cast your mind back to a time when you felt really happy. If it's not possible to find a time when you feel really happy, just go for a time where you felt calm. When you felt calm or happy, I want you to jot down the first thing that comes into your head when I ask the following things. When I feel this way, I see myself as. When I feel this way, I think others are. And when I feel this way, I think that the world is. And then I want you to do is to think of a time when you felt low in mood. And I want you to jot down the first thing that comes into your head when I ask. When I feel this way, I see myself as. When I feel this way, I think others are. When I feel this way, I think the world is. What do you notice? I really like this quote. We don't see things as they are. We see them as we are. So everything that we perceived is shaped by our own personality, our own experiences, and then we project those onto whatever we're seeing in the same way that we did that looking at this dog. We see what we look for, and then we defend what we see. So this is this idea of we see things as we believe reality is, and then what we do is we defend that to the hilt. We go for I am right, don't we? And that can cause blocks, it can cause very intense emotions, and it can be extremely unhelpful. It makes us quite ineffective. There's a really interesting clip in a film called A Beautiful Mind, which is based on a scientist called John Nash. And he was given a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and he experienced seeing visions of people who he believed were real. So because they looked, sounded and were experienced by him as very similar to other people he met, he believed that this was true, and the evidence around him felt like this was a justified belief. He held on to that belief even when other people were telling him that what he was seeing was not true. Because we see what we look for and then we defend what we see. However, what changed for John in the film was when he realised that the people that he was seeing didn't age. And it was at that point he was able to justify accommodating an alternative viewpoint. And therefore he was able to revise his beliefs. So what he effectively did at that point was checking the facts. The facts was that the people that he was seeing did not age. And I think it's a really good example of how we get locked into a reality that we believe to be true, and then we continue to defend that until something changes, rather than right at the beginning looking at, is what we're seeing accurate? Is there a different way of looking at this? Might it be useful to turn it on its head and say to ourselves, you know, what if I am wrong? How could I see this in a different way? How would that change our emotions? So, believing that our thoughts are absolute truths can be an absolute recipe for disaster. This is what wars were built on. This is how conflicts arise. They can seriously affect our lives when we believe things to be absolutely true and can't accommodate a different way of looking at things. I think this is a really good picture, isn't it? And just very simply sums up how looking at things from different angles produces different viewpoints. And knowing the facts is essential for solving problems. Unless we have all the information, we're not going to make some very wise decisions. And just by checking the facts and examining our thoughts, we can change our emotions, which is really skillful, makes us much more effective in the world. So let's look at how we do that. And the first step is acknowledging that we are in emotion mind. It's a really important step to take, isn't it? So if we're in emotion mind, what is the emotion that we're feeling in this moment? And sometimes that can be quite hard to discern, can't it? So this is where it comes into having a look at the sheets, paying attention to the physical sensations you're having, your body posture. If you can, what's my face doing right now? What's the urge that I have? And all these things help us identify the emotions that we have. Don't overthink it. So go with the emotion that you feel that you recognise in that moment. Because that's the other thing, is we can move from emotion to emotion quite rapidly. And so identifying, well, this is the emotion that I'm going to look at right now, and I'm going to, if anything else pops up here, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to jot it down on a piece of paper so that my brain knows that I have acknowledged that there's something else going on there, and I'm also going to work on that. Now also beware, because sometimes emotions hide other emotions. So anger can hide fear and sadness. If we weren't allowed to show fear when we were growing up, quite often it gets hidden by anger. Equally, if we weren't allowed to show anger when we were growing up, sometimes we feel sadness or guilt instead of anger. That's what makes it so hard to work out what we're feeling a lot of the times, and that's okay. Because what we're going to do is we're just going to go with the feeling that we recognise in this moment. That's what we're going to start looking at. And then if other emotions emerge, then we will do what I said before, is just jot them down. So go with what you know right at this moment. So how do we do fit the facts? So we've identified our emotion. And we want to find out whether the intensity and the emotion fits the facts, the situation that we find ourselves in at the moment. And so to give you a bit of an illustration about this, again, I want you to get a piece of paper and pen, and I want you to gauge how much guilt you feel you might feel when I read out the following scenario. So, as we know, guilt occurs when we have committed an action or not that violates our own values or moral code. It's usually something that sort of goes against group norms, but it's not usually that big that it warrants us being expelled from the group. So, and that's when we get that sort of that heaviness, don't we, with guilt. Sort of weighs on us. And the urge is to repair the damage. Okay. So we're going to work with guilt, and the scenario, the prompting event that I want you to measure the amount of guilt that you might feel in that situation is that you have a very close friend and you have forgotten to send her a card for her birthday. So pause the video and just mark on a column from 0 to 100. How much guilt? Where would you put the amount of guilt that you would feel if you hadn't sent your friend a card for her birthday? Now I want you to imagine that your friend had been really helpful and supportive recently, and so you had promised to arrange a party for her to thank her, and you had forgotten. How much percentage guilt do you think you would have? And if you would have that amount of percentage guilt now, what percentage guilt would you put the forgetting her birthday card scenario as? I want to add to this. What if you only said you forgot, but you hadn't? You just realised how much work it would be and you just didn't want to do it. How much percentage guilt would you feel now? Mark that on the column. And if that's the percentage guilt that you feel now, what percentage would you now put the forgetting her birthday card as? So I'm going to really ramp it up now. What if you slept with her partner? How much guilt would you have then? Put that on the column. And if you look now at the percentage guilt you'd feel for that, what now would you move the percentage guilt to for forgetting her birthday card? Do all those things have the same level of guilt? Or when you provide a context for them, does the percentage of guilt change because it's fitting the facts? So it's a really good illustration of sometimes when we go from 0 to 100 really, really quickly, we don't look at the wider context. Because we don't look at the wider context, we don't look at whether that level of intensity that we're feeling for that particular emotion, whether that does actually fit the facts. Whether that's a reasonable amount of emotion to feel for that particular scenario. And we're really good with that, aren't we, with first world problems. And I'm going to give an example of that on the next slide. Okay, so we're going to work with a scenario here, okay, and so we're going to go with, first of all, what is the emotion that I want to change? Okay, and you will find this list of questions on handout 8. So, the emotion that I want to change, or I wanted to change, was anger. And the scenario, the prompting event, okay, was that I was going for a day out to Harry Potter World, and I'd never been there before. And for those of you who have been there, you have to book about 3 months in advance, and you get a time slot. So our time slot was 1:30. So we had got the train down. It all seemed very, very simple. And the first train was cancelled. So we had to get 2 trains to get on a train then from Birmingham to Watford. And so Watford, you get off and you get this little coach to Harry Potter World. It was all very exciting. So we were slightly delayed, but it was still possible to get there on time because we'd allowed plenty of time. So we were on the train from Birmingham to Watford, and we got to about 15-20 minutes away from Watford, and the train came to a grinding halt. As you can imagine, our hearts sank. We were really quite apprehensive about what was happening. We weren't getting much information from the tannoy. So we sat and we waited, and then over the tannoy it came that, oh, I'm really sorry, but all the power cables are down there, and that means that lots of technical things can't happen. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take the train back to Birmingham. At that point, I felt really, really angry because this was blocking our goal, which was to get to Harry Potter World. Now, if they had taken the train back to the next station along the line, there's a possibility we could do something with that. But actually, if they were going to take the train all the way back to Birmingham, there would be no hope whatsoever that we would get anywhere near Harry Potter World. And by this time we had about half an hour until our time slot started. So what were my interpretations, thoughts and assumptions about that event at that time? Well, I went to town. Train service is rubbish. I'm never going to use the train again. Lots and lots and lots of associations flooding in with disruptions from other train services that I've been on. It should not break down. It should have been addressed by now. This is to do with underfunding. So then obviously that takes me off into a whole political arena as well. And then these people who are making profits out of this, company directors, all the money is going there. Oh, seriously, I really went for it. So, am I assuming a threat? Yes, I most definitely was. I was not going to get to Harry Potter World. I was making the assumption that that was not going to happen. Because we were going back to Birmingham, I couldn't find another route. Evaluate the chances that the threatening event will really occur. Well, there was a very high chance that actually this would occur because of the fact that we were going to go back to Birmingham. Now, the other possible outcome is that the train could stop at an earlier station and there might be a way of finding a different route round. In order for me to find out that information, I needed to speak to the conductor who said he was coming round the carriages on the tannoy. Now, I think we all know we do not get the best out of people if we're really angry when we're talking to them. And if by the time he was coming through the carriage to us, he would have already spoken to an awful lot of other angry people. So what I would need to do in some way is get this level of intensity down, because whilst there might be some justifiable reasons for why I was feeling angry, actually it was not going to be very effective. The catastrophe was not getting to Harry Potter World. So I want to just emphasise here, we are on first world problems here. The day out, I was catastrophising, would be completely ruined. We would not have another chance of getting there for another 3 months. So then I started moving into, okay, well, let's do a bit of problem solving here. If we have to go back to Birmingham, could we salvage some of the day? Could we perhaps go to a restaurant? Could we go to the cinema? What sort of things could we do that might rescue some of the day? At the very least, it's going to give us a fun story to talk about. And then ask, does my emotion and its intensity fit the facts? Well, the facts are that I probably wouldn't get where I'm going. However, in the general scheme of things, in the context of things that are happening in the world, this is a first world problem. I'm very lucky to be able to purchase tickets to go to Harry Potter World in the first place. It's possible when they hear about the disruption, I would get my money back from the train ticket. That would allow me to purchase tickets again from Harry Potter World. We could do it differently next time. There are different ways of doing this. So thinking about, does this actually fit the facts, helps bring my emotions down. Not only does it help me bring the emotions down, but also what it does is it allows me to be calm enough to speak to the conductor and to have a better opportunity of finding a different way around this. Okay. So knowing that the level of emotion I was feeling did not fit the facts, you can see that maybe the level of emotion that I was feeling could have been somewhere around here. That actually does fit the facts. Anger's a funny one, because when we feel angry, there is likely to be some level of justification for that anger. It probably is because a goal of ours is being blocked. However, it doesn't mean to say that acting on that anger is effective, and that's the big difference with anger. There might be lots of justifiable reasons that we can find as to why it is okay that we're feeling angry. However, it's not effective to act on it. And the really good example of that is if I had stayed in that very angry state on the train, I was unlikely to get what I needed. I wanted to be able to talk to somebody, I wanted to be able to get options, and the way I was going to get that was by making sure that I was calm and I was approachable. Be aware also that anger usually starts with blame, and you know that you have got anger, and it's like shoulds and oughts about what we expect of ourselves and the world. So sometimes being able to ask, you know, what if I was wrong in this situation? What if there was a different way of looking at it? Just widens this up. If you have a look at this diagram here, what I need to do is I need to find a way of getting my anger down from here to the amount of emotion that fits the facts to allow me to feel a bit more in control. And with anger, what we know is that anger, very, very tense, isn't it? So we've got tight jaw, we've got narrow eyes, we've got tense muscles. And so one of the things that we can do quite quickly is what we did on distress tolerance, which is half smile, willing hands. Now, if you add a slump to that as well, you get a change in your emotion. So we're doing opposite action to downregulate the amount of anger. And then what we need to do is we need to do problem solving to address the amount of emotion that actually fits the facts. And in that case, what I was doing in that situation was being calm enough to speak to people, to try and find other ways of getting to Harry Potter World. And just out of interest, you'd be glad to know that actually they did stop at the station before and we managed to find a different route. We were late, but we got there. So you'd be pleased about that. Okay. So the other thing we might want to do is we might want to upregulate. It might be that there's something happening in our lives where actually we do need to feel a bit more anger or more fear about what's happening. And what we're doing is we're finding ourselves down here when really we need to be up here. So there are times when we need to upregulate too. And we're going to come on and have a look at that next week. So just quickly, I just wanted to go over a couple of emotions. So both anger and fear are both driven by anticipating danger. That is usually understandable, but most of the time not justified at that level of intensity. So for example, fear is highly influenced by association. I can remember vividly having a car accident many years ago, and I felt huge amounts of anxiety about getting back in any car even when it was stationary. So my fear is understandable in that situation. However, it's not justified because there is very little that's going to happen to a stationary car when I'm sat in it, unless of course I'm on the motorway. In the same way, somebody might get attacked outside a nightclub and then they start to feel fear when they go near that nightclub or even the area around there. So it's a very understandable fear, but it's not justified. That attack is not happening at that time. And those are some really good questions to ask yourself when you do feel afraid. At this moment, in this place, am I being physically threatened? At this moment, in this place, is anyone I care about being physically threatened? At this moment, in this place, is my well-being or that of another person who I care about being threatened? If the answer is no, then the amount of fear that you're feeling is if you know that's something over 10%, then that's probably not justified. And there needs to be a way of getting that level of intensity down. Additionally important because when we are in high states of arousal with fear and anger, our capacity to think diminishes rapidly. All we are focused on is the threat, and that is extremely unhelpful. There are also examples where our anxieties are centered around a justifiable concern, like threats to our accommodation or to income. So that fear is entirely justified. However, it might not be effective, because if we have that level of intensity of that particular emotion at that time, it stops us from thinking. It limits our problem-solving abilities. So sometimes this goes back to, sometimes we have an emotion where it might be justified, it might fit the facts, it might be up here and it might fit the facts. However, it's not effective for us. And there needs to be a way of us getting that emotion down to a point where we can actually function effectively, where we can use problem solving, where we can address the situation that we're in. So for the last teaching part of this video, I want to leave you with a little story. It's only a short story. It's called Lessons from the Bird That Flew South. Lovely little bird. Okay, so a little bird was flying south for the winter. However, it was an unusually cold season, and it became so cold that the bird froze. And when it froze, it fell down to the ground in a large field. Whilst it was lying there, frozen in this large field, a cow came along and dropped some dung on it. Poor little bird. As the frozen bird lay there in the pile of the cow dung, it began to realise how warm it was. The dung was actually thawing the little bird out. He lay there, all warm and happy, and soon began to sing for joy. A passing cat heard the bird singing and came to investigate. Following the sound, the cat discovered the bird under the pile of cow dung and promptly dug him out. Then the cat ate the bird. So, what are the lessons that the little bird learned? Well, the first one is, not everyone who shits on you is your enemy. Not everyone who gets you out of the shit is your friend. Here's a really important one. When you are in deep shit, it's best to keep your mouth shut. So, practice tasks. Okay, so we want the check the facts, handout 8 and 8A. We want opposite action and problem solving, deciding which to use, handout 9. Now this is a starting point in preparation for the video for next week. You want pros and cons of regulating emotion, which is worksheets 1, and the check the facts worksheet 5. Now the practice task is to do this several times. We want deliberate practice from this, and we want deliberate practice from this because the more times you do it, the more times you're automatically going to start going there. Your brain will learn that this is a different way of doing things, but we need deliberate practice for this to happen. So basically we're looking at more than 7 times. So checking the facts at least once a day and getting into the habit of doing that. Okay. And as you're sitting here now, think about, how am I going to do that? How am I going to build deliberate practice into my day? Do I need to set a timer? Is there somebody who could remind me to do that? What's going to get in the way And how can I make sure that it doesn't? Because this is really important. This gives you some great skills that allows you to stay in control and become much more effective at problem solving and managing your emotions. So as a way of ending, just want you to scan yourself from the top of your head down to the tips of your toes. What do you notice? Just jot that down. And then just allow yourself a pause and to reflect on what are you taking away with you from this session. And then write down something that makes you smile. And if it's the same from next week, from last week, try thinking of something else that makes you smile, so that we get a really nice list over these next few weeks of all the things that makes you smile. And I will see you next week.